Hi, welcome to the Frugal Frau. I'm Sukey, your host. And today what we're going to do is show you how to cut dados using a few simple hand tools. But before we get started, please like, subscribe, and comment because it really helps the channel out and we really appreciate it. So by simple hand tools, I just mean a couple of chisels, a UD knife, a marking knife, a mallet, and a router plane. And so let's get started. First, scribe the dado with using a board scrap from the same wood board to be placed in that dado. Use a marking knife for this. Deepen the scribe lines with either a marking knife or a utility knife. Either one will work. Use the router plane to cut a depth mark into the board edge, so that when chiseling out the majority of the waste, you do not cut below the desired depth for the dado. Be sure to do this on the other board edge too. Cut into the deepened scribe lines with a utility knife to start the cuts to be made with a chisel. This helps to keep the cuts nice and straight. Repeat this process on the other scribe line, remembering to cut in from the center because that is where you'll be removing all the waste anyway. This is just a profile so that you can see how deeply Tom has scribed, and you can see the scribe mark from the router plane before he begins to chisel. Chisel along the length down to where you have cut with the utility knife. Work back and forth, deepening the cut on the edges of the dado by tapping the chisel flat side to the dado edge down until you are nearly to the depth previously marked with the router plane. Note that you are not going to take out all the excess material with just one or two chisel passes. You're going to have to go back and forth, working until you get to the depth. And then when you're almost to the depth, at that point you should use your router plane. Taking the excess material off with the chisel is much easier than taking all of it out with the router plane to begin with. You can also deepen the edges of the dado with a utility knife. Use a chisel or a knife, whichever works best for your hands. Tom tends to use the knife for this process, and I actually tend to use the chisel as I find cutting the knife that deeply kind of hurts my hands. But then again, my hands are half the size of Tom's, or maybe less than half the size of his hands. This dado has now been cut to nearly the depth needed. So Tom picks up the router plane and starts using it to simply smooth out the bottom of the dado. Just use your chisel to clean out the little bits that the router plane leaves behind, and then go back and forth between that and the router plane until you get the bottom of the dado smooth. Test fit the dado with the board you're going to put in it, or in this case he's using a little waste cut from the end of that board, but it is the same width or depth as the piece that it's going to be put in there, so it doesn't matter. He just uses a chisel to chisel off little areas where it's kind of sticking and where it's not quite fitting. Continue test fitting and refining the cut until your shelf or piece of wood that you're putting in the dado fits snugly, but not too snug. I call this the cantilever chisel method. to further refine that cut and just to widen it a little bit. And this is the final test fit, and it fits. And this is just a close-up of the completed Dado.